My entire family knew my husband was sleeping with my sister, and helped him hide it. At my 35th birthday, they told me to grow up and accept it. I just smiled, then handed them envelopes that would tear their lives apart. What was inside? You won't believe it. Before all of that, my life was a meticulously coded program running on the finest hardware. I was Meredith, a cybersecurity engineer, adept at dissecting complex systems, identifying vulnerabilities, and building impenetrable defenses. My career was everything I'd dreamed of: challenging, rewarding, and a testament to the logical, analytical mind I possessed. At home, I believed I had found the human equivalent of perfect design. He was the kind of man who didn't just walk into a room. He commanded it, filling it with an infectious warmth and a laugh that could chase away any shadow. We had a beautiful house, 2 well-behaved rescue dogs, and a life that, on paper and in my heart, felt utterly complete. Our family, or what I once believed was our family, was equally picture-perfect. My parents, Lorraine and Gerald, had always prided themselves on their close-knit unit, and then there was Brenda, my younger sister. She was the family's darling, their radiant star, their Nongtha, as my mother often called her. Her blonde hair and artistic flair contrasting sharply with my own practical, dark-haired demeanor. Growing up, Brenda always shone brighter in their eyes. Her scraped knees received more frantic attention, her mediocre school plays drew louder applause, and her every fleeting ambition was met with fervent encouragement. I, the quiet, bookish one, was largely left to my own devices, my academic achievements acknowledged but rarely celebrated with the same effusiveness. I learned early that my value lay in my competence, my ability to fix things, to be independent, and when Mitchell entered my life, effortlessly charming them all, he seemed to fill that subtle void, bringing me into the warm circle of familial approval I'd always yearned for. He was the golden thread that tied my carefully constructed world together. Or so I thought. He seemed to love me for times me asterisk, not just for what I could achieve or provide. He made me feel seen, cherished, and finally, equally adored. I remember our first date, a casual coffee that stretched into an entire afternoon. Mitchell talked with such passion about his work in architecture, his eyes twinkling with ambition. He listened intently when I spoke about the intricacies of my cybersecurity projects, asking intelligent questions that showed genuine interest, not just polite pretense. He was everything I hadn't realized I was missing. Charismatic, attentive, and incredibly sweet. He'd bring me coffee in bed, leave little notes on my laptop, and always made me feel like the most important person in the world. Even my parents, who had always viewed my previous boyfriends with a detached skepticism, instantly adored Mitchell. He was charming, he was successful, and most importantly, he made their quiet, sensible Meredith light up. He fit into our family almost times perfectly, seamlessly adopting the role of the beloved son-in-law, always ready with a witty remark or a helping hand. Looking back, that ease, that effortless integration, should have been a red flag in itself. Nothing that perfect ever lasts. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a glitch in the background code. Mitchell, who used to leave his phone lying carelessly on the counter, suddenly started carrying it with him everywhere. Even to the bathroom, he'd position it face down on tables, and if it buzzed, his hand would instinctively reach for it. A quick, furtive glance before he dismissed it as just work. Then came the late nights. At first, it was legitimate client meetings or unexpected project deadlines. He'd arrive home, tired but apologetic, smelling faintly of office coffee and city exhaust. But gradually, the excuses grew thinner, more generic, and the scent changed, sometimes a hint of something floral. Not my perfume, not Brenda's, just different. And Brenda, my dear sister, who once only visited for family dinners or specific events, started dropping by more frequently, always unannounced, always when I was either at work or out for errands. Just popping in to say hi to Mitchell, she'd text, or needed to borrow a cup of sugar, even though our pantry was always fully stocked. She'd laugh off my questions about her sudden domesticity, blaming it on a newfound interest in baking or a desire to spend more time with her favorite brother-in-law. I noticed her lingering gaze on him, a subtle softening of her features when he entered the room, a possessiveness that I, in my naive perfection, attributed to sibling affection. My logical mind, so adept at spotting anomalies in data streams, was shockingly blind to the ones swirling in my own home. I dismissed the growing unease as stress, or perhaps just the paranoia of a woman whose biggest fear was always being overlooked. I tried to push away the cold knot forming in my stomach, clinging to the illusion of my perfect life, unaware that the seeds of its destruction had already taken root. The uneasiness wasn't a sudden storm. It was a persistent drizzle, seeping into the foundations of my carefully constructed world. My mind, trained to identify patterns and predict threats in the digital realm, found itself in a bewildering loop when confronted with the subtle distortions in my personal life. I was an architect of digital fortresses, yet my own emotional walls were porous, letting in whispers of suspicion that my intellect tried desperately to silence. Each unexplained late night, each hushed phone call Mitchell took in the other room, each casual, unannounced visit from Brenda felt like a fragmented data packet, refusing to align with the expected protocol of our perfect system. I wanted to debug it, to find the logical error, but there was no neat line of code to point to, only an insidious feeling of wrongness that defied my analytical tools. It was like trying to diagnose a phantom bug. You know it's there, corrupting the system, but you can't quite pinpoint its origin. Trust was the bedrock of my relationship with Mitchell, and doubt, a corrosive acid, threatened to eat it away. The incident that truly pricked the illusion came one Tuesday morning. Mitchell had a habit of leaving his phone charging by the bed, a habit that had mysteriously ceased, but this particular morning, rushing out the door for an early meeting he'd forgotten to prepare for, he'd left it on the kitchen counter. My coffee cup was still warm in my hand when its screen flickered. A notification from Brenda. It wasn't the words themselves that struck me, though they were familiar, teasingly intimate. Can't wait for our secret rendezvous, see you soon. But the emoji, the timing, and the sudden clench in my gut. My immediate ingrained reaction was to dismiss it. Asterisk. Sisterly banter. Brenda's always been a bit dramatic. Asterisk. Mitchell had often indulged her, playing along with her playful flirtations, a dynamic I'd always seen as harmless. But the coldness that spread through me wasn't about drama. It was the stark contrast between the message's playful tone and the stone that had dropped into my stomach. It contradicted the narrative I desperately clung to, a dissonance my logical mind couldn't quite resolve with a simple excuse. I felt a chill, a quiet alarm bell ringing deep within, a warning signal I deliberately chose to override. Later that week, I found myself packing for a 3-day cybersecurity conference in San Francisco. Normally, I relished these trips. The intellectual stimulation, the chance to connect with peers, the brief escape from routine. This time, however, a sense of foreboding clung to me like a shadow. I tried to focus on my presentations, on the cutting-edge discussions I'd be leading, but my thoughts kept circling back to the phone. The late nights, the lingering scent. It wasn't paranoia, not anymore. It was a pattern, an anomaly too consistent to ignore. My professional training had taught me that when a system exhibits unexpected behavior, the first step is observation, gathering irrefutable data. Emotions were unreliable, but facts were solid. I needed facts. As I zipped up my suitcase, my gaze fell upon the small, discreet security camera I used for monitoring my servers at home when I was away. A thought, cold and clear as a mountain spring, crystallized in my mind. It wasn't about catching them. It was about disproving my own creeping fear. About restoring the perfect code of my life. Or, so I told myself. A few minutes later, the tiny lens was strategically positioned, blending seamlessly with the kitchen decor, its silent gaze fixed on the very heart of my home. It was a precaution, a logical step, nothing more. The stale airport air and the drone of the plane engines still echoed in my head as I finally stepped back into the quiet of my home. The conference had been a blur of networking, presentations, and sleepless nights. But underneath the professional facade, a persistent hum of anxiety had accompanied me, a subtle pressure urging me to get back, to check. I told myself it was for security, just a quick verification that everything was as it should be. Nothing more. My suitcase lay forgotten by the door. My fingers, usually so steady navigating complex interfaces, trembled slightly as I pulled out my laptop, connecting to the secure server that housed the camera's feed. Each click felt like an act of accusation. Yet I clung to the engineer's detached curiosity, the need to confirm, to resolve the anomaly. The initial clips showed nothing but the mundane. The dogs wandering through the kitchen, a delivery person dropping off a package, the rhythmic whir of the refrigerator. My shoulders began to relax, a faint sense of relief washing over me. Asterisk. See? Nothing. Asterisk. Then, a flicker. A new timestamp. Mitchell entered the kitchen, followed closely by Brenda. She was laughing, her familiar bright sound, a sound I'd always associated with joy, with family. Mitchell poured them both glasses of wine. They stood close, closer than I would have expected for mere brother-in-law and sister. My breath caught, lodged somewhere between my lungs and my throat. They talked, their voices too low for the microphone to pick up clearly, but their body language was starkly eloquent. Brenda reached out, tracing the line of Mitchell's arm. He covered her hand with his own. My heart began to pound, a frantic warning drum against my ribs. Then he leaned in. And she met him halfway. Their lips met. Not in a quick, chaste peck, but in a slow, lingering kiss that deepened with an undeniable hunger. Her hands moved to his chest, then around his neck, pulling him closer, twisting his dark hair between her fingers. His arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly, pressing her body flush against his. It was a kiss of lovers, a kiss brimming with intimacy, with ownership. In Times My Times kitchen, on Times My Times footage, the world tilted violently. A raw, guttural cry tore from my chest, but it made no sound. Suffocated by the shock, I felt a visceral wave of nausea, my stomach churning, threatening to revolt. The blood drained from my face, leaving me cold and lightheaded, my vision blurring at the edges. I stumbled back from the screen, bumping into the counter. The dull ache in my hip a distant echo to the searing pain that had ignited in my chest. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a flirtation. This was a sustained, calculated, utterly cruel betrayal. The image of their intertwined bodies burned behind my eyelids, branding itself into my memory. Mitchell, my loving husband. Brenda, my darling sister. My perfect life, meticulously coded and fortified, had just crashed, leaving behind nothing but a shattered mess of error messages and a chilling sense of emptiness. I watched it again, then again, pressing replay until the pixels blurred, as if by sheer force of will I could change what I was seeing. Each repetition was a fresh stab, a renewed realization of the depth of the deception. The way Mitchell looked at her, the way she melted into him, it wasn't new. It was practiced. It was comfortable. This wasn't a sudden lapse in judgment. It was an ongoing, deeply entrenched affair, right under my unsuspecting nose. The floral scent, the guarded phone, the late nights, Brenda's frequent visits, they all coalesced into a horrifying, undeniable pattern. My analytical mind, usually so precise, felt overwhelmed, drowning in a flood of raw, scorching emotion, betrayal, disgust, a profound, aching emptiness where trust once resided. For a long moment, I knelt on the cold kitchen floor, the laptop still open, the incriminating scene frozen on the screen. The urge to scream, to smash something, to confront them immediately, was almost unbearable. But then, a flicker of something colder, harder, began to ignite within me. The engineer, buried beneath the rubble of my broken heart, slowly resurfaced. Confrontation now would be nothing but an emotional outburst. Easily dismissed, easily denied. They would lie, as they had clearly been lying for months, perhaps years. They would manipulate, and I would have nothing but my word against theirs. My cybersecurity training had taught me that in the face of a breach, emotion was a vulnerability. What I needed was data. Irrefutable proof. I needed to understand the full scope of the attack before I launched my counteroffensive. A cold, quiet resolve began to spread through me, numbing the pain just enough to allow logic to regain its tenuous hold. I wouldn't scream, I would plan, and I would make them regret every single second of this perfect illusion they had so brutally shattered. The cold, quiet resolve that had settled over me was a shield, a necessary detachment that allowed my brain to bypass the searing pain and revert to its default mode: problem solving. My professional life had honed me into a master of digital forensics, an expert in uncovering hidden truths within layers of data. Now, those skills became my most potent weapon. I didn't just re-watch the damning footage. I extracted it, encrypted it, backed it up to multiple secure, off-site locations. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. The kitchen camera was merely the opening salvo. I began a systematic deep dive into Mitchell's digital life. A world I once believed was transparent to me. His work laptop, which he occasionally left at home, became a trove of information. Using techniques I employed daily for corporate security audits, I recovered deleted emails, cross-referenced calendar entries, and accessed cloud storage accounts. I found veiled messages with Brenda, ostensibly about family matters but laden with a subtext of intimate knowledge and shared secrets. Financial records, accessed through joint accounts and credit card statements, painted an even clearer picture. There were hotel bills from business trips I knew weren't solely for business. Lavish gifts purchased for Brenda that far exceeded what a brother-in-law would typically buy, and unexplained withdrawals that tracked perfectly with dates Brenda posted about extravagant purchases on social media. I even managed to retrieve deleted call logs from an old burner phone I discovered in Mitchell's office drawer, revealing a horrifying frequency of communication between him and my sister. Each piece of evidence was a fresh cut, but each also solidified my resolve, transforming grief into an icy clarity. This wasn't a spontaneous act, it was a deeply entrenched conspiracy, with a meticulously organized digital folder bulging with irrefutable proof. I knew I couldn't navigate this alone. My mind, though sharp, was too entangled in the emotional fallout to see every legal nuance. I needed an architect of justice, someone who spoke the language of law with the same fluency I spoke code. I remembered Diane Sterling, a formidable divorce attorney recommended by a colleague who had navigated a particularly acrimonious split. Her reputation for being sharp, ruthless, and utterly dedicated to her clients preceded her. My fingers hovered over her number for a long moment, a tremor running through me. This call would make everything real, irreversible. It would officially mark the end of the life I had so carefully constructed. Taking a deep breath, I pressed dial. Diane Sterling's office. A crisp voice answered. "Hello, my name is Meredith Olson," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need to schedule a consultation. It's urgent." Diane herself called me back within the hour, her voice a low, authoritative alto that instantly commanded attention. "Miss Olson, I understand you have a pressing matter. My assistant mentioned it was quite sensitive. Can you give me a brief overview before we schedule a full meeting?" I took another breath, forcing the words out, each one a shard of the life I was losing. "My husband Mitchell is having an affair with my younger sister Brenda, and my parents are complicit, helping them hide it. I have evidence. Extensive evidence." There was a beat of silence on the other end, not of shock, but of professional assessment. "I see. And you're looking for a divorce?" I stated, the word tasting bitter. "And I want to ensure my assets are protected. I want justice, Diane. Not just for the infidelity, but for the profound betrayal from my entire family." "Understood," she replied, a note of flint in her tone that was strangely reassuring. "Bring everything you have. Every piece of communication, every financial record, every video. The more concrete evidence we have, especially demonstrating an ongoing pattern and your family's involvement, the stronger our position will be regarding asset division and potential emotional distress claims. We'll aim for maximum legal leverage. Be prepared for a fight, Miss Olson. Cases involving family betrayal of this magnitude often get very ugly, very quickly. Your husband and sister will likely deny everything initially, and your parents will try to discredit you. We need to be unassailable. Her words, though grim, were a balm to my engineer's mind. She wasn't sugarcoating it. She was laying out the parameters of the problem, the potential attack vectors, and the necessary countermeasures. She understood that this wasn't just about severing a marriage. It was about dismantling a web of deceit. We scheduled an in-person meeting for the following morning. Hanging up, a new kind of coldness settled within me. One less of pain and more of strategic readiness. The game had changed. I was no longer a victim. I was a combatant, armed with data and ready to deploy. The cold, strategic clarity that Diane's words had instilled in me didn't just focus on Mitchell and Brenda. It cast a stark, unforgiving light on every interaction I'd had with my parents over the past months, the seemingly innocuous conversations, the subtle nudges, the knowing glances between them when Mitchell and Brenda were mentioned. They all clicked into place, pieces of a puzzle I had desperately refused to see. It wasn't just Mitchell and Brenda's betrayal. It was a deeply woven tapestry of deceit. With my own mother and father holding the threads, I remembered a dinner just a few weeks prior, before I left for San Francisco. Mitchell had been particularly effusive, regaling my parents with a story about a spontaneous trip he and Brenda had taken to an art exhibition, ostensibly to find a unique piece for Our Times living room. Brenda had giggled, a little too loud, about how Mitchell was just so good at picking things out, and my mother, Lorraine, had beamed, her eyes sparkling with an almost proud affection. Oh, those two. She'd sighed, dabbing her lips with a napkin. Always had such a special connection. Meredith, dear, you know how Brenda can be a bit fragile. Mitchell's so good for her. My father, Gerald, had simply nodded, a complacent smile on his face, raising his glass in silent approval. At the time, I'd brushed it off as my mother's usual doting over Brenda and Mitchell's harmless camaraderie. Now, the memory tasted like ash. It wasn't fragility they were protecting. It was a brazen, ugly secret. That unwavering favoritism, that uncritical adoration for Brenda, had been a constant hum throughout my life. I recalled my 7th birthday. I wanted a chemistry set, a proper one with test tubes and bubbling liquids. Brenda, at 5, decided she wanted a pony. Despite living in a suburban house with no yard, on my birthday, I received a simplified children's chemistry kit from my parents, along with a gentle suggestion that I not make a mess. Brenda, however, was surprised with pony rides at a local stable and a life-sized plush pony that took up half the living room. She's just so times imaginative asterisk, my mother had cooed, as I quietly unpacked my small safe tubes. My achievements, like winning the regional science fair or earning a full scholarship to a prestigious university, were always met with a quiet, "That's nice, dear," while Brenda's slightest artistic doodle or participation in a school play would elicit rapturous applause and immediate phone calls to every relative. I had learned to internalize it, to believe that my quiet competence was simply less exciting than Brenda's effervescent, if often dramatic, personality. It made me self-reliant, yes, but it also taught me that my emotions, my needs, were secondary. Mitchell had, for a time, made me believe that I was seen, that I was prioritized. Now, I understood he was just another extension of the same pattern, drawn to the family's darling. After my initial call with Diane, my parents called, their voices thick with concern, though not for me. "Meredith, darling," my mother began, her tone carefully modulated. "Mitchell called us. He's quite upset. He said you handed him some rather confusing papers." "Confusing?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion I felt. They're divorce papers, Mom. I think they're quite clear. Now, Meredith, my father interjected, his voice attempting a soothing authority that now felt grating. Let's not be hasty. Mitchell is a good man. You two have something special. And Brenda? Brenda is just being Brenda. She always looked up to Mitchell, you know. They have a certain kindred spirit. Kindred spirit? I repeated, a cold laugh escaping my lips. Is that what you call it, Dad? When my husband and my sister are having an affair under my roof? A beat of uncomfortable silence. Then my mother's voice, higher, tinged with a feigned exasperation. Meredith, don't be so dramatic. You're imagining things. Brenda has always been affectionate. And Mitchell is just being supportive. You're a cybersecurity engineer. You're always in your head. Always overthinking things. Sometimes, you just need to learn to let go. To embrace what is. They deeply care for each other. And you're part of that family too. Yes, my father chimed in. We've always been such a close family. You wouldn't want to ruin that, would you? Think about what this does to everyone, Meredith. To Brenda, to Mitchell, to us. This is just a misunderstanding. You need to be the adult here, Meredith. You need to accept it. Accept it. The phrase echoed the hook of my story, the cruel demand they had made at my birthday. Only now I realized it wasn't a one-off, it was their long-standing manipulation. Their insidious gaslighting. Trying to make me doubt my own sanity. To twist my reality to fit their comfortable lie. They weren't just passively aware, they were active participants. Shielding the offenders, blaming the victim, all to maintain their curated image of a perfect family. They wanted me to believe I was the problem, the one disrupting their carefully constructed peace. The conversation ended with me cutting them off, my jaw tight. Their audacity, their thinly veiled attempts to convince me of my own delusion, only fueled the fire in my belly. My digital evidence was strong, but it only proved the affair and some financial impropriety. It didn't fully capture the breadth of my parents' psychological manipulation or the extent of their financial backing of Brenda and Mitchell's affair. I needed more. I needed someone who could operate beyond the digital realm. Someone who could observe, investigate, and document the subtle, ugly truths that hid beneath their polished facades. I contacted Diane again. I need a private investigator, I told her, without preamble. Someone who can dig deeper into my parents' involvement, their financial support of Brenda, and any other extracurricular activities. Diane didn't question my resolve. I have just the person, Regina Vance. She's discreet, resourceful, and has a knack for uncovering hidden connections, especially within family structures. She's expensive, but worth every penny if you want every stone overturned. Hire her, I said, my voice firm. I want to understand the full scope of their complicity. I want proof of every lie, every manipulation, every penny they spent to facilitate this betrayal. I want them to have nowhere left to hide. The game was no longer just about survival. It was about unmasking the entire corrupted system. The revelation of my parents' calculated deception, their attempts to gaslight me into accepting the unacceptable, had hardened something vital within me. Regina Vance, the private investigator, was a phantom limb I never knew I needed. Her reports, delivered with professional detachment, filled in the insidious gaps. She uncovered multiple instances of my parents transferring significant sums to Brenda's accounts, ostensibly for artistic endeavors or living expenses, but often coinciding with Mitchell's lavish gifts and their secret rendezvous. She also confirmed a series of suspicious, discreet meetings between my parents and Mitchell, usually at a cafe far from our usual haunts, where hushed conversations indicated a coordinated effort. The web was tighter, more intricate than I had imagined. Each piece of information was a drop of poison, but also a dose of clarity. It was against this backdrop of accumulating evidence and chilling understanding that my 35th birthday loomed, a date that once promised celebration, now transformed into an ominous ticking clock. It was no longer just a milestone. It was the designated battleground, the stage upon which the truth would be irrevocably unleashed. The irony wasn't lost on me. The day meant to commemorate my birth would instead mark the symbolic death of the family I had known. Every morning, I woke with a gnawing anticipation, my gut clenching. But my resolve solidified. There would be no retreat. Maintaining the facade of normalcy required an almost superhuman effort, a constant draining performance. Each casual dinner, each forced family gathering, each polite conversation with Mitchell or Brenda felt like navigating a minefield. I'd nod, I'd smile, I'd offer innocuous comments, all while my brain was meticulously cross-referencing their words, dissecting their body language for any tremor of guilt or defensiveness. Mitchell, perhaps sensing a shift he couldn't quite pinpoint, became subtly more attentive, overly solicitous. He'd bring me flowers, offer to cook dinner, and ask about my day with an exaggerated earnestness that made my skin crawl. "Everything okay, love?" he'd ask, his eyes searching mine, trying to find the crack in my composure. I'd meet his gaze evenly, a serene, unreadable mask in place. "Perfectly fine, Mitchell, just a lot on my mind with work." I watched him closely, seeing the fleeting relief, then the lingering uncertainty in his eyes. He was like a hacker who thought he'd covered his tracks, unaware that the system administrator was already rebuilding the entire log file. Brenda, on the other hand, grew increasingly skittish. She avoided my eyes, her usual effervescence replaced by a nervous energy. Her visits dwindled, replaced by vague excuses. But when she did appear, she'd hover around Mitchell, her hand often brushing his arm, a subconscious plea for reassurance. She'd try to engage me in light-hearted chatter about irrelevant things, her laughter a little too brittle, her smiles not quite reaching her eyes. "Oh, Meredith, you look a bit tired," she'd remark, her tone laced with a false concern that was meant to be disarming. I'd simply reply, "Long hours," and watch her flinch, her guilt a visible tremor beneath her carefully constructed cheerfulness. The discomfort radiating from both of them was a silent confirmation, a testament to their complicity. They knew what they were doing was wrong, and my unwavering calm, my lack of accusation, was clearly unsettling them more than any outburst ever could. They expected tears, rage, hysterics. They got a ghost. My parents, true to form, intensified their gaslighting campaign, though now it was tinged with a desperate edge. My mother called almost daily, ostensibly to discuss birthday plans, but always veering into discussions about family unity and forgiveness. "Meredith, darling," she'd coo, "it's your birthday. Such a special time for us all to be together. Don't let silly misunderstandings come between us. Life is too short for grudges." My father would reiterate, "Mitchell is coming, of course, and Brenda. We're a family, Meredith. You need to remember that." Their words were carefully chosen weapons, aimed at my emotional core, designed to make me feel isolated, unreasonable, to guilt me into submission. But with Diane's counsel and Regina's evidence, their manipulations now sounded hollow, pathetic even. They were no longer speaking to a confused victim, but to a strategist calculating her next move. In the days leading up to the party, my meetings with Diane became more frequent, more focused. We refined the legal strategy, ensuring every document was flawless, every clause ironclad. The stack of papers grew. The divorce petition citing irreconcilable differences and adultery, meticulously detailing Mitchell's financial malfeasance and emotional abuse, the formal notices to my parents regarding the cessation of all financial support and the potential for legal action concerning their complicity in fraud, and the civil lawsuit against Brenda for emotional distress, alienation of affection, and the recovery of significant debts I'd discreetly settled for her over the years, now laid bare with interest. "Are you absolutely certain, Meredith?" Diane asked, her gaze piercing. "One final check on my resolve. Once these envelopes are delivered, there's no going back. This will shatter not just your marriage, but your entire family as you know it. They will fight you with everything they have." I looked out her office window, at the bustling city below, a stark contrast to the quiet storm brewing within me. "I've been shattered, Diane," I replied, my voice steady, betraying no hint of the storm. "They did that for me. This isn't about shattering. This is about rebuilding, brick by brick, from the ashes they created. I want every asset protected, every penny accounted for, and every lie exposed. I want justice, and I want them to understand the true cost of their betrayal." Diane nodded slowly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "Very well, Meredith. Then we are ready. The documents are complete, sealed, and ready for delivery. Consider the stage set. The curtain rises on your birthday. The scent of my mother's signature roast chicken hung heavy in the air, a false comfort that did nothing to soothe the tremor in my hands that only I could feel. My 35th birthday party was in full swing, or rather, in full pretense. The familiar hum of polite chatter, the clinking of glasses, the forced laughter, it all felt like a carefully constructed stage play. And I was the reluctant lead, awaiting my cue for the final act. Mitchell, ever the charmer, was holding court by the fireplace, his arm casually draped around Brenda's shoulders as she simpered beside him, sipping a glass of Chardonnay. My parents, Lorraine and Gerald, moved among the few unsuspecting relatives who had been invited, their smiles tight, their eyes constantly flitting towards me, assessing my composure. My Aunt Sarah, oblivious, remarked, "Meredith, darling, you look so serene tonight. Must be all that good fortune you've had." The irony was a bitter taste on my tongue. I watched them, my heart a frozen knot in my chest. Mitchell's laugh, once the sound that warmed my soul, now grated like nails on a chalkboard. Brenda's fragile beauty, once a source of sibling affection, now seemed a grotesque mask. My parents' solicitous glances, once comforting, now felt like the probing eyes of jailers. Each interaction I witnessed, each glance exchanged between the trio, was a confirmation of the insidious conspiracy I had spent weeks unearthing. Their discomfort was palpable beneath their forced cheerfulness. Mitchell occasionally shot me a worried, questioning look, while Brenda avoided my gaze entirely, her hand tightening around her wineglass. My parents, veterans of emotional manipulation, maintained a facade of unwavering cheer, though I could see the subtle flicker of panic in my mother's eyes whenever my calm demeanor held steady. They were waiting for me to break, to rage, to give them an excuse to dismiss me. I had no intention of obliging. As the evening wore on, my mother, ever the orchestrator, gathered everyone in the living room for the customary birthday toast. Mitchell moved to my side, a practiced, loving smile on his face, his hand gently resting on my lower back. I felt no warmth, only a phantom chill where his touch lay. "To Meredith!" my father boomed, raising his glass. "Our brilliant, accomplished Meredith. May this year bring her all the happiness she deserves." A chorus of well wishes followed. Then, my mother stepped forward, her voice saccharine, "And a special thank you to Mitchell, who always makes Meredith so happy, and to Brenda, our beautiful girl, who always brings such light to our family, such kindred spirits. All of us." She paused, her eyes locking onto mine, a subtle, almost imperceptible hardening of her expression. "Meredith, darling, we want you to be truly happy. You know, sometimes in life, we just need to grow up and accept things as they are. Embrace what truly is." The words hung in the air, a thinly veiled instruction, a final act of gaslighting, echoing their cruel demand from weeks ago. But this time, they landed not on a confused victim, but on a woman fortified by cold, hard facts. I smiled, a genuine, albeit chilling, smile that didn't quite reach my eyes, the kind of smile you offer before delivering a perfectly calculated blow. "Thank you, Mom, Dad," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the pleasantries like a finely honed blade. Every eye in the room turned to me, sensing the shift in the air. "And thank you, Mitchell and Brenda, for reminding me of the true meaning of kindred spirits, and for showing me what accepting things as they are truly means. I took a deliberate step back from Mitchell, his hand dropping from my back as if burned. The silence in the room became absolute, heavy with unspoken anticipation. "You're right, Mom," I continued, my gaze sweeping over each of their faces, holding Mitchell's, then Brenda's, then my parents'. "Life is too short for misunderstandings. And for illusions. So, I have a few things I've chosen to accept. And a few things I'd like to share. So we can all truly embrace what is." From the discreet messenger bag I'd brought, I withdrew 3 crisp, white envelopes. Their edges were sharp, their contents heavier than mere paper. I held them up, one in each hand, then the third in the middle. "Mitchell," I began, my voice devoid of emotion. "This first envelope is for you." I placed it on the coffee table in front of him. "Inside, you'll find the finalized divorce papers. They outline the terms of our separation, including the full forfeiture of your claim to any joint assets, given the extensive evidence of your infidelity and financial misconduct." His jaw dropped, his face paling instantly. "Next," I said, turning to my parents, who were now staring at me with a mixture of disbelief and growing horror. "Mom, Dad, this is for you." I placed the second envelope on the table. "This contains formal notice of the cessation of all financial support, effective immediately, and a notification that my legal team is reviewing your direct and indirect financial contributions to Mitchell and Brenda's affair, as well as your attempts to undermine my mental and emotional well-being. Consider it a formal withdrawal of my filial trust, and a prelude to potential legal action." My mother gasped, a small, choked sound, while my father's face contorted into a mask of pure rage. Finally, I turned my attention to Brenda, who had gone utterly white, her hand trembling so violently she almost dropped her wine glass. "And Brenda, my darling sister," I said, holding out the third envelope to her. "This one is for you. It's a civil lawsuit for emotional distress, alienation of affection, and a comprehensive demand for the repayment of every single debt I have ever settled for you, with interest, meticulously itemized and backed by my attorney. I trust you'll find it quite enlightening." Brenda stared at the envelope, her eyes wide and unseeing, then finally took it with a hand that shook uncontrollably. The silence shattered. "Meredith! What the hell is this?" Mitchell exploded, leaping to his feet, scattering the other guests. His face was a mask of furious disbelief, quickly morphing into panic. "This is insane. You can't be serious. We can fix this. This is a mistake." He lunged for my arm, but I instinctively recoiled, stepping back. "A mistake?" I echoed, my voice still unnervingly calm. "No, Mitchell. A calculation. A consequence." Brenda, finally finding her voice, let out a high-pitched wail. "Meredith, no! You can't! This isn't fair! We love each other. You're just being jealous and vindictive." Tears streamed down her face, the performance of a lifetime, but it no longer swayed me. My mother Lorraine rushed towards me, her face blotchy with anger and fear. "Meredith Olivia Olson, how dare you? This is your family. You are ruining everything. You need to stop this madness right now." My father Gerald stood rigid, his face a thundercloud, his fists clenched. "You ungrateful girl. After everything we've done for you, you think you can just come in here and destroy us? Destroy you?" I repeated, a cold, hard laugh finally escaping me. "No, Mom, Dad, Mitchell, Brenda, you destroyed yourselves. I merely provided the final push." I looked at Mitchell, whose desperate pleas were turning into threats. "You'll regret this, Meredith," he snarled, his charm completely gone, replaced by a vicious anger. "You think you can just walk away? I'll make sure you lose everything. Your career, your reputation." "I think you'll find, Mitchell," I interrupted, cutting him off with a gaze that promised retribution, "that my legal team has already ensured that the only one losing everything is you. And as for my reputation, the truth has a way of solidifying one's standing. Yours, however, is about to crumble. I turned, sweeping my gaze over the chaos I had unleashed, the shattered faces of my betrayers, and for the first time in months, I felt a strange, cold sense of liberation. The illusion was gone, and the cleanup had just begun. The lingering scent of my mother's burnt roast chicken and the metallic tang of fear and fury in the air were the last things I registered before I walked out. I didn't storm. I simply turned and left, leaving the wreckage of their carefully constructed reality behind me. The stunned silence that followed my pronouncements lasted only a moment before erupting into a cacophony of shouts, accusations, and desperate pleas. I heard Mitchell's voice, raw with panic, Brenda's high-pitched sobs, and my parents' enraged denunciations. But their words were just background noise, impotent against the fortress I had built around myself. My carefully calculated retreat was less an escape and more a strategic withdrawal, ensuring I was clear of the blast radius of their initial shockwave. My phone, which I had deliberately set to silent and placed in a secure locker at a remote location, began to light up the moment I turned it back on a safe distance away. A deluge of missed calls, voicemails, and texts flooded in. A desperate, uncoordinated barrage. Mitchell's messages ranged from furious threats, "You'll regret this, Meredith, I'll ruin you," to pathetic begging, "Please, Meredith, let's talk, don't do this to us." Brenda's were hysterics laced with accusations of jealousy and cruelty. My parents' calls were a predictable mix of outrage and attempts to guilt-trip me, interspersed with demands for an immediate explanation and retraction. I deleted them all, unheard, unread. My emotional firewall was up, nothing was getting through. The next few days were a blur of intense collaboration with Diane. We finalized the filing of the divorce papers, the civil suit against Brenda, and the legal notices to my parents. Each step was executed with the precision of a surgical strike, designed to maximize impact and minimize their ability to retaliate effectively. Their initial attempts to discredit me were swift and messy. Mitchell tried to paint me as emotionally unstable and vindictive, while Brenda launched a tearful social media campaign, portraying herself as a victim of my unprovoked jealousy. My parents, predictably, contacted relatives and mutual acquaintances, spreading a narrative of my sudden, inexplicable breakdown. But I was already a step ahead, having provided Diane with preemptive dossiers on their characters and potential tactics, allowing her to preemptively counter their smear campaign with cold hard facts to key individuals. Then came the call from Regina Vance, the private investigator. Her voice, usually calm and objective, held a distinct edge of concern. "Meredith, I've uncovered something deeply disturbing. It goes beyond mere complicity in the affair or financial manipulation." My heart hammered against my ribs, a primal thrum of alarm. "What is it, Regina?" "Your parents, specifically your mother, have been in contact with a psychiatrist, Dr. Evelyn Thorne, known for her controversial practices in involuntary commitment," Regina began, her words unfolding into a horrifying tapestry. I intercepted some encrypted emails and phone records. They were gathering information, discussing your unstable mental state, your delusions of betrayal, and your supposed paranoia. There were even drafts of a medical assessment, suspiciously detailed, outlining a manufactured case for severe mental health issues, explicitly designed to justify an involuntary hold. A cold dread seeped into my bones, colder and deeper than any betrayal I had felt before. Gaslighting wasn't just a term, it was a weapon. They were trying to have me institutionalized? My voice was barely a whisper, the question hanging in the air, heavy with unspeakable horror. "Yes," Regina confirmed, her voice grim. "They intended to use your irrational behavior, specifically your discovery of the affair, and your subsequent actions, as grounds. The plan was to paint you as delusional, perhaps paranoid, schizophrenic, and have you committed to a facility where they could control your assets and silence you indefinitely. Your nervous breakdown at the birthday party, if it had occurred, would have been the perfect catalyst for them to spring their trap." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Their constant dismissals, the insidious whispers that I was overthinking, dramatic, unstable. It wasn't just to make me accept their lies, it was to lay the groundwork, to establish a narrative of my mental instability, to prepare the world for my sudden disappearance behind padded walls, my mother's cooing about silly misunderstandings, and my father's insistence that I accept what is were not just manipulative, they were part of a sinister, calculated plot to strip me of my sanity, my freedom, and my very identity. This wasn't just about money or revenge for an affair. This was an attempt to erase me, to lock me away for the unforgivable crime of discovering their truth. A wave of pure, unadulterated horror washed over me, quickly followed by a searing, white-hot rage. My engineer's mind had always sought logical solutions, but this was an act of pure, unadulterated depravity. They weren't just flawed people making bad choices. They were monsters lurking beneath a veneer of familial love. My perfect family wasn't just broken, it was a predatory organism, willing to consume its own for personal gain. Diane needs to know this immediately, I stated, my voice now steady, hard as steel. The tremor was gone, replaced by an immovable resolve. The initial sting of betrayal had been replaced by a chilling understanding of the true enemy. This was no longer just a divorce. It was a fight for my life, my freedom, my sanity. Diane, when informed, was equally appalled. This elevates their actions to a completely different level, Meredith. This is attempted unlawful imprisonment, a direct threat to your physical and mental well-being. We can pursue criminal charges, or at the very least, use this to completely decimate their credibility in any court of law and ensure their social and financial ruin. We immediately moved to reinforce every legal and personal defense. Diane dispatched cease and desist letters to Dr. Thorne, putting her on notice about potential complicity. We secured restraining orders against Mitchell, Brenda, and my parents, citing harassment and the threat of unlawful confinement. I upgraded my home security systems, added personal protection details, and diversified my assets to make them virtually untouchable. I severed all remaining ties to their shared social circles, ensuring that their attempts to spread disinformation would fall on deaf ears. The cleanup wasn't just about financial disentanglement. It was about building an impenetrable fortress around what remained of my life, protecting myself from the toxic contagion of their malice. The game had changed. They weren't just betrayers. They were existential threats, and I would dismantle them piece by insidious piece. The blueprints for their undoing, meticulously refined by Diane, were no longer theoretical. They were actionable. My perfect family, a predatory organism willing to consume its own, had just provoked a cybersecurity engineer who now had full access to their vulnerabilities. The dismantling began, not with a bang but with a series of precise, calculated strikes that would unravel their carefully constructed lives. Our first move was to formally report the plot to have me institutionalized. Diane, with Regina's meticulous documentation in hand, the intercepted emails detailing Dr. Thorne's involvement, the drafts of fabricated medical assessments, and the recorded conversations between my parents and the doctor's office, presented an unassailable case to the authorities. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a criminal conspiracy. The police launched an immediate investigation, and concurrent complaints were filed with the state medical board against Dr. Thorne, effectively halting her ability to practice and sending a clear message that such unethical practices would not be tolerated. Next, we focused on Mitchell. My evidence, fortified by Regina's deep dive, revealed not just the affair, but also his misuse of company resources for personal expenses related to Brenda, and subtle but clear instances of him leveraging his position for her artistic career, actions that blurred ethical lines and violated his employment contract. Diane packaged this information into a comprehensive report and discreetly delivered it to his firm's human resources and ethics department. The consequences were immediate. Mitchell was placed on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. The social fallout was swift. Colleagues who once admired his charm now looked at him with a mix of pity and disgust, his professional standing crumbling under the weight of his personal transgressions. Word traveled fast within his industry. and the whispers of his ethical lapses began to circulate, tarnishing his once pristine reputation. My parents' carefully curated image, built on a foundation of respectability and community involvement, also began to crack. Diane and I, with Regina's help, compiled a detailed narrative of their complicity, their financial support of the affair, and the heinous plot against my sanity. This wasn't just presented to authorities, it was strategically shared with key extended family members, especially those whose opinions carried weight, like Uncle Warren and Perry. I crafted a carefully worded email, factual and devoid of emotional rhetoric, attaching redacted excerpts of evidence. It detailed the affair, the financial manipulations, and the abhorrent plan for my institutionalization. The reactions were a spectrum of shock, outrage, and profound disappointment. Uncle Warren, a man who valued integrity above all else, called me personally, his voice heavy with sorrow and anger. "Meredith, I don't know what to say. This is an abomination. Your father, your mother, I cannot believe it. Rest assured, I will be speaking with them, and I assure you, this will not stand. Not within our family, and certainly not within the business." His words, though painful, were a confirmation that my efforts were not in vain. The social ostracism from my parents began subtly at first, with unanswered calls and polite but firm refusals of invitations, then escalated into outright condemnation from those who valued truth and family loyalty. Their calls to me, once filled with gaslighting, turned into frantic, tearful pleas for me to recant, to save the family's honor, revealing their true concern was only for their own reputation. I met their pleas with a cold silence, my resolve hardening further. Brenda, ever the fragile artist, found her past indiscretions catching up to her with terrifying speed. Regina's investigation unearthed a pattern of petty theft, bounced checks, and credit card fraud from her past, some of which had resulted in probation that she had conveniently forgotten to mention. My civil lawsuit against her, demanding repayment of the debts I had covered, brought these prior legal issues to light. The police, already investigating the larger family conspiracy, took renewed interest in Brenda's financial history and the circumstances of her probation. Her attempts to portray herself as an innocent victim of my jealousy were undermined by her documented history of deceit and manipulation. The legal net was tightening around her, suffocating her usual escape routes. Each revelation, each calculated move, was a painful severing of ties, a deliberate incineration of the past, but with every shred of their deceit brought into the unforgiving light, a profound sense of clarity settled within me. This wasn't merely about revenge, a simple reciprocal act for a wrong committed. This was about reclaiming my freedom, my sanity, and my very right to exist without their shadow looming over me. They had tried to erase me, to lock me away, to seize everything I had built. My strategic planning, my meticulous evidence collection, my unflinching pursuit of justice, wasn't just a response. It was a desperate, primal fight for self-preservation. I was no longer just Meredith, the heartbroken wife. I was Meredith the engineer, systematically dismantling a corrupted system that had threatened to consume her, and I would not rest until every piece of their insidious conspiracy lay exposed and broken. The meticulous reports Diane had delivered to Mitchell's firm didn't just sit on someone's desk, they detonated. The internal investigation, initially contained, quickly spilled into the public sphere. Mitchell, once the charismatic architect, found himself engulfed in a storm of ethics violations, professional misconduct, and the particularly damning revelation of his affair with my sister, which, when coupled with the misuse of company funds for Brenda's lavish artistic supplies and exhibitions, transformed him from a respected professional into a public disgrace. His carefully cultivated image crumbled under the relentless scrutiny of the press and the unforgiving gaze of his peers. I saw the headlines flash across news feeds I no longer sought out but couldn't avoid. Prominent architect fired amidst scandal, allegations of fraud and adultery. His professional organization revoked his license, and former clients, horrified by the revelations, severed ties, initiating legal action for breach of trust. The financial ruin followed swiftly, a landslide of legal fees, lost income, and the forfeiture of assets mandated by our divorce settlement. The man who had once commanded a room now seemed to shrink with every public appearance, his once effervescent charm replaced by a haggard, haunted pallor. Social ostracism was absolute. Those who had once fawned over him now crossed the street to avoid his gaze. He was no longer Mitchell, the golden boy. He was merely a cautionary tale, stripped bare by his own insidious choices. Brenda's fate, though perhaps less public, was no less inevitable. Regina's relentless digging had unearthed not only her current pattern of financial misdeeds, but also her history of probation violations and numerous unsettled petty theft charges that had been conveniently overlooked or paid off by my parents in the past. My civil lawsuit, meticulously itemizing every debt I had ever covered for her, from overdue rent to emergency medical bills that turned out to be cosmetic procedures, provided a clear motive and pattern of deceit. The police, already investigating the larger conspiracy against me, found ample reason to reopen her dormant files. One crisp Tuesday morning, as Brenda was leaving a gallery opening, attempting to reclaim some semblance of her artistic prestige, she was met by two uniformed officers. The subsequent news reports were terse but definitive. Local artist Brenda Olson arrested for theft probation violation. She was taken into custody, her tearful protests falling on deaf ears, her fragility no longer a shield against the consequences of her actions. My former sister, the family's darling, would now face justice not on a fabricated stage, but within the cold, impartial walls of a courthouse. The unraveling of my parents' lives was perhaps the most poignant, a slow, painful descent, rather than a sudden fall. Their carefully constructed social standing, once unassailable, began to erode as the full extent of their complicity in the affair, and more horrifyingly, their plot to have me institutionalized became undeniably clear. The judicious sharing of Regina's redacted reports with key relatives and trusted family friends had created an immediate, visceral revulsion. Calls went unanswered, invitations ceased. The silence, louder than any accusation, became their constant companion. My mother, Lorraine, initially attempted to rally support, spinning tales of my instability and vindictiveness, but the evidence against them was too overwhelming, too meticulously documented. Her dramatic pleas for family unity now rang hollow, tainted by the knowledge of her sinister intentions. My father, Gerald, usually adept at navigating social circles, found himself isolated, his business colleagues giving him a wide berth. The weight of legal fees, the penalties from financial investigations into their dealings, and the loss of my financial support which, unbeknownst to many, had propped up their lifestyle for years, forced them to put their sprawling family home on the market. The house, once a symbol of their curated perfection, became a monument to their hubris. Emptied of warmth and filled only with the ghosts of their betrayals, they moved to a smaller apartment, out of sight, out of mind, abandoned by the very people whose approval they had so desperately craved. The most unexpected, yet profoundly satisfying consequence unfolded a few weeks after Brenda's arrest. Uncle Warren, my father's younger brother, had always been a quiet, observant presence in our family. A man of unwavering integrity, who valued honesty above all else. After receiving my carefully worded email and reviewing the attached evidence, he requested a private meeting. He met me not in a bustling office, but in a quiet, unassuming coffee shop, his face etched with a sorrow I hadn't seen since my grandmother's funeral. "Meredith," he began, his voice raspy, his gaze direct and unflinching. "I've read everything. I've seen the reports. I've spoken with Gerald, or rather, I've tried times to speak with him. He denies it all, of course. Blames you. But the evidence? It's overwhelming. And the plot to institutionalize you? Meredith, that is beyond comprehension. It is a depravity I never thought I would witness from my own brother." He paused, taking a slow, shaky breath. "Your grandmother, bless her soul, always said you had a steel spine and a mind sharper than anyone in this family. She would be proud of how you handled this. And disgusted by the rest. A lump formed in my throat. The unexpected validation from Uncle Warren. A surprising balm amidst the wreckage. Thank you, Uncle Warren. I managed, my voice thick with unspent emotion. He nodded, then pushed a stack of legal documents across the table. Gerald was always meant to take over the family business. You know, the manufacturing company. After I retired, it was his birthright, his expectation. But I cannot, in good conscience, hand over everything my father built, everything I dedicated my life to a man capable of such malice and moral bankruptcy. Not after what he tried to do to you. He met my eyes, a profound decision solidifying in his own. Meredith, you are the only one in this family with the integrity, the intellect, and the sheer moral fortitude to run this company. Your work ethic, your ability to dissect complex problems, your unwavering pursuit of truth, these are the qualities a leader needs. I want you to take over, not in some advisory role, but as my successor, as CEO. I'll guide you, of course, for as long as you need, but the future of this company, the legacy of our family's honest name, I want it in your hands. I stared at the documents, then at Uncle Warren, stunned. It wasn't just a job offer. It was a profound act of trust, a restoration of a family legacy that had been corrupted, and a direct, irrefutable repudiation of my father and everything he stood for. He was not just bypassing his brother, he was elevating me, the overlooked daughter, to a position of power and respect, recognizing the true value he saw in me. Uncle Warren, I began, my voice filled with a mixture of shock and gratitude. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Meredith, he replied, a faint, weary smile gracing his lips. It's time for the right people to lead, and it's time for true justice to be done. The dominoes had indeed fallen, each one revealing a new landscape, a new opportunity, forged from the very ruins of my past. Uncle Warren's offer was a balm, a lifeline cast into the turbulent waters of my shattered life. The weight of his trust, the sheer magnitude of his faith in me, was a profound vindication, a stark repudiation of everything my parents had done. Yet, even as the professional opportunities blossomed, painting a hopeful future, the shadows of the past found new, insidious ways to wound. The call came from Diane, her voice carefully modulated, but laced with an undeniable gravity. Meredith, she began, Regina has some additional findings regarding Brenda's situation. My gut clenched. I braced myself for another layer of deceit, another financial misstep, another petty crime unearthed. But what followed was far more insidious. A final, grotesque twist of the knife that plunged into the very core of my being. Brenda is pregnant, Diane stated, the words hanging heavy in the air between us, echoing with unspeakable horror. My world, which I had just begun to rebuild on solid ground, swayed violently. Pregnant. Brenda, my sister, the image of Mitchell and Brenda, intertwined in My Time's kitchen, flashed behind my eyes, sickeningly vivid. Whose? I managed, my voice a strained whisper, though a terrifying, cold dread already suggested the answer. The violation was not just about Brenda's monstrous act. It was a deeply personal assault. Mitchell had slept with my sister during our marriage, a betrayal that had already poisoned everything. But he had also slept with me before our marriage, during what I believed was the nascent stage of a loving, committed relationship. The thought, insidious and horrifying, burrowed into my mind. If he could be so utterly depraved with Brenda, what other secrets did he hold? Could he have been intimate with both of us, simultaneously? At some point, during that period before our wedding, when I was so utterly blind with love, the timeline, the depths of his deception, twisted in my mind, making me question every touch, every whispered endearment from my past. The idea that his pervasive treachery could extend backwards in time, tainting even the seemingly pure beginning of my own relationship with him, was a psychological torment far worse than any financial loss. It was an assault on my very sense of self, on the sanctity of my own bodily autonomy, forcing me to confront the terrifying possibility that his deceit was so profound, it could retroactively poison every intimate memory I held. The victories I had meticulously engineered, Mitchell's downfall, Brenda's arrest, my parents' ostracization, Uncle Warren's extraordinary offer now felt hollow, coated in the bitter residue of this new revelation. I had won the battle, but the war for my inner peace was far from over. The legal skirmishes had drained me. Each court filing, each deposition, each confrontation, chipping away at my reserves. I was exhausted, not just physically, but spiritually. The anger, once a focused weapon, now felt like a heavy cloak, stifling. It was a suffocating weight, a constant reminder of the darkness they had inflicted. My home, once a sanctuary, was now imbued with the ghosts of their betrayal. Every room echoing with lies. The silence, which I once craved, now felt heavy, punctuated by the phantom whispers of their treachery. I yearned for a true quiet, a place where their shadows could not reach. The decision solidified slowly, a gentle current guiding me towards a new horizon. I needed more than just a new job. I needed a new life, a new context where their story held no power. Seattle. The idea, initially a fleeting thought, began to take root. A city of innovation, nestled amidst breathtaking natural beauty, a place far removed, geographically and emotionally, from the toxic soil of my past. It offered the promise of anonymity, a blank slate where I could simply be asterisk, without the specter of past hurts defining my present. I accepted Uncle Warren's offer, with the condition that I would operate remotely for a period, gradually transitioning the company's tech division to my new location. Setting up a branch there, he understood, his gaze conveying a silent empathy that transcended words. It was a monumental step, severing the last physical ties to a life that had become unrecognizable. Packing up my house, sorting through years of accumulated memories, was a cathartic, yet agonizing process. Each item held a story, a memory, many of them now tainted. The photographs of Mitchell and me, once cherished, were now nothing but cruel reminders of an illusion. Brenda's childhood drawings, once displayed proudly, were torn and discarded. I kept only the essentials, the items that sparked genuine joy or served a true purpose, learning to distinguish between sentimental value and emotional baggage. The act of letting go was a slow, painful untangling, a deliberate effort to excise the bitterness that had taken root so deeply. I began to practice mindful meditation, focusing on breath, on the present, on the gradual erosion of the anger that had defined me for so long. It wasn't about forgiveness. Not yet. Perhaps never. It was about release. It was about understanding that holding on to their poison only continued to harm me. Seattle wasn't just a destination. It was a symbol, the first step on a long, arduous journey towards true healing, towards finding a quiet corner of the world where I could finally breathe. The agonizing question that had gnawed at the edges of my new life was finally answered 2 weeks after I'd set foot in Seattle. When Diane's call came through, my stomach clenched as I answered, bracing myself for another shard of unpleasant truth. But her voice held a new, lighter cadence. "Meredith," she said, "the DNA results are in. The baby is Mitchell's," unequivocally. A wave of pure, untainted relief, so profound it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. It wasn't about the baby itself, or even Brenda. It was the definitive, irrefutable closure on Mitchell's insidious reach into my own body, my own past. His treachery, thankfully, had not extended that far back in time. The last, lingering fear of a contaminated past was finally excised, leaving behind a clean, clear space for healing. Seattle unfolded before me like a fresh canvas. The vibrant tech scene welcomed my skills, and within weeks, I'd secured a senior position at a burgeoning startup, overseeing cybersecurity architecture, a role that challenged my intellect without the toxic undercurrents of family drama. Uncle Warren's company, now with a burgeoning remote tech division in Seattle under my direction, thrived, and I found immense satisfaction in building something tangible and ethical. My new apartment, with its wide windows overlooking the Puget Sound, felt clean, unburdened. I filled it with sunlight and the quiet companionship of a new rescue dog, a goofy golden retriever mix named Pixel. I discovered a passion for hiking the Olympic trails, the towering ancient forests and crisp, salt-laced air grounding me in a way I hadn't felt possible. The city offered anonymity, yes, but also a sense of community. I joined a local hiking group, a book club, and even started taking pottery classes, finding unexpected joy in shaping clay with my hands, a stark contrast to the precise, logical world of code. Each new interaction, free from the weight of history, was a small victory, a reaffirmation of my own worth beyond the shadows of my past. It was at one of these pottery classes that I met Gregory. He was tall, with kind eyes and a quiet wit, a landscape architect whose hands were perpetually stained with earth. There was no grand drama, no sweeping gestures, no intoxicating charm that felt too good to be true. Instead, there was a steady, comfortable presence. He listened when I spoke. Truly listened, without interrupting or trying to fix me. He laughed at my dry jokes and shared stories of his own projects, his passion for sustainable design palpable. Our first date was simple: coffee and a long walk through a botanical garden, discussing everything from urban planning to the unexpected joy of watching things grow. There was a gentle respect, an easy camaraderie that felt like a revelation after Mitchell's performative affection. I found myself, tentatively at first, sharing glimpses of my past, not as a victim recounting trauma, but as a survivor explaining how she had learned to build anew. Gregory met my disclosures with quiet understanding, never judgment. He taught me that trust wasn't about blind faith, but about consistent, genuine action, about shared vulnerabilities, and the quiet comfort of being truly seen, truly accepted, for exactly who I was, flaws and all. Amidst this burgeoning new life, a final bittersweet chapter with my past family unfolded. A call from my Uncle Perry, his voice thick with unease, informed me that my father, Gerald, was gravely ill. Pancreatic cancer. It was aggressive. I flew back, not out of obligation, but a complicated sense of unresolved humanity. My mother was still there, a ghost of her former self, withered by public scorn and private shame, her eyes hard and unrepentant even in the face of her husband's decline. There was no warmth, no apology from her, only a brittle silence that I chose not to break. But with my father, it was different. He was frail, his once imposing presence reduced to a whisper. He didn't ask for forgiveness, nor did I offer it. Instead, we sat in silence for long stretches, occasionally exchanging memories of my grandmother, of simpler times. He admitted, with a profound sigh, that he had made some terrible mistakes, not specifically mentioning the affair or the plot, but his eyes conveyed a weary understanding of the chasm that separated us. I spoke of my life in Seattle, of Uncle Warren's trust, of my new work. I set clear boundaries, silently, by keeping my visits brief, avoiding any mention of Mitchell or Brenda, and focusing solely on the shared, human thread between us. It wasn't a full reconciliation, not in the way one sees in movies, but a fragile truce, a moment of quiet, raw acceptance of what had been lost, and what could never be regained. It was a sliver of peace, not forgiveness, but a release from the burning need for it. I returned to Seattle knowing I had honored my own complex feelings, leaving him to whatever peace he could find, and leaving my mother to the cold, solitary comfort of her own unrepentant heart. The jet stream carrying me back to Seattle felt like a river, carving a deeper channel between my past and my present. My father's frail, accepting silence, my mother's brittle, unyielding heart. They were now receding landscapes, fading into the haze of distance and memory. The woman who stepped off that plane? was not the same one who had boarded it weeks ago, nor the one who had, months prior, watched her world shatter on a kitchen screen. That Meredith had been a victim, unknowingly trapped in an illusion. This Meredith was an architect of her own freedom, tempered by fire, and standing on the unshakable bedrock of truth. They had taught me, through their very cruelty, the most vital lessons of my life. The non-negotiable sanctity of self-worth, the absolute necessity of impenetrable boundaries, and the profound distinction between blood and true kinship. For so long, I had sought validation from a family that overlooked me, from a husband who pretended to adore me. Now, I understood that my value was inherent, not contingent on their approval or affection. The anger, once a consuming inferno, had transmuted into a quiet strength, a steel spine that no betrayal could ever again bend. Forgiveness, in the traditional sense, remained elusive, perhaps unnecessary. What I had found was release, the understanding that their actions were a reflection of their own brokenness, not a judgment on my worth. Letting go wasn't about excusing them. It was about reclaiming my own peace, refusing to let their poison linger in my soul. Seattle, with its constant hum of innovation and verdant landscapes, had become more than just a place. It was the crucible of my rebirth. My professional life flourished, a testament to what could be built when ingenuity was applied to creation, not destruction. The startup I joined thrived, its cybersecurity architecture built with a vigilance born of personal experience. Uncle Warren's company, under my remote guidance, expanded its tech division, offering me a different kind of legacy, one built on integrity and foresight. My apartment overlooking the Sound, once just an anonymous space, had become a home, filled with the warmth of Pixel, my goofy golden retriever, and the quiet comfort of being truly alone, yet never lonely. My family was now a constellation of souls chosen for their light. Uncle Warren's steadfast integrity, Diane's fierce loyalty, Regina's quiet strength. My new friends from the hiking group who celebrated personal bests on challenging trails, the eclectic members of my book club, whose lively debates expanded my mind, the fellow potters, with whom I shared the quiet joy of creation. Each connection was genuine, unburdened by history or expectation. And then there was Gregory. With his steady gaze and earthy wisdom, he was the antithesis of Mitchell's performative charm. Our love was built on quiet truths, on shared laughter over muddy boots and imperfect pottery, on the gentle give and take of two people who saw each other, truly saw each other, and chose to build a future together, brick by honest brick. He didn't try to fix my past, he simply helped me inhabit my present, whole and unafraid. He was not a replacement, but a revelation of what true partnership could be. The journey had been brutal, a descent into the very depths of human depravity, but it had also been a testament to resilience, a forging of steel from the fires of betrayal. My intuition, once dismissed as paranoia, had been my most reliable compass, guiding me through the fog of lies. I no longer saw my past as a scar, but as a map, a guide that had led me to this profound understanding. True happiness isn't found in a carefully constructed illusion, but in the fearless pursuit of an authentic life, built on integrity, empowered by boundaries, and illuminated by a chosen community of genuine love. So, if there is a message to be found in the wreckage of a life shattered by deceit, it is this: trust your gut, build your defenses, both digital and emotional, and when faced with betrayal, remember that you possess the inherent power not just to survive, but to dismantle the corruption and build something far more beautiful, far more enduring. From the ashes, you are not a victim of their story. You are the author of your own, and your next chapter can be one of triumphant, unburdened light. Mine certainly was.